Trump's Senate now looks poised to pass what's been called the worst bill in modern American history that'll affect the rest of your life, as Trump's threatening Dem and Republican alike, with some even resigning over it. In Idaho, you had firefighters rushing in to stop a wildfire, but then walking straight into a sniper's trap. And over the weekend, we saw pride being banned, protests being blocked, and democracy being dealt another blow. We're jumping into all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show, your daily dive into the news. But first, just wanted to let you know, because you have till Friday on this, I just did a In My Feels mini drop for you over at beautifulbastard.com, where right now, if you're a cynic like me, you can snag yourself an It Is What It Is and It's Pretty Terrible tee, Things Are Less Than Ideal gear, full of microplastics and existential dread shirts, and or for my more aggressive Andes out there, the Cat Stand and Fight tee. All available right now over at beautifulbastard.com. I got links in the description, and if you use code 2bits before Friday, you'll get 25% off. But with that said, we have a lot to talk about today, starting with this. Trump is now threatening his political opponents, with some actually retiring in response, as the Senate now looks poised to pass what's been described as the worst bill in modern American history. Right? And so there are a lot of moving parts here. There are a lot of things you need to understand because it's going to affect you and a lot of other people. And where I'll start is with yesterday, Trump seemingly threatened to cut off federal funds to the city if progressive Democrat Zoran Mamdani is elected as mayor of New York City and he doesn't do what Dear Leader wants.
What did you make of the New York Democrat primary? Mamdani.
He's a communist. I think it's very bad for New York. I don't know that he's going to get in. It's inconceivable that but he's a communist, and he's a pure communist. I think he admits it, but I can't imagine it. But let's say this. If he does get in, I'm going to be president, and he's going to have to do the right thing, or they're not getting any money. He's got to do the right thing.
Right, and that's actually a very serious threat. I mean, the city's comptroller reported last year that it receives more than $100 billion in federal dollars. And another key thing here, though it's about the court of public opinion and trying to create narratives, is that this is not the first time that Trump has attacked Mamdani and attempted to paint him as a communist. Though that is what he's trying to label Mamdani, since he proposed a number of populist economic policies like free childcare, free public buses, city-run grocery stores, new affordable housing, more mental health workers, and a $30 minimum wage. Or with Trump making the same communist allegation on Truth Social last week, and also saying during a press conference recently,
he's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York, but the rest of the country is revolting against it.
But Mamdani has rejected that label.
How do you respond? Are you a communist?
No, I am not. And I have already had to start to get used to the fact that the president will talk about how I look, how I sound, where I'm from, who I am, ultimately because he wants to distract from what I'm fighting for. And I'm fighting for the very working people that he ran a campaign to empower that he has since then betrayed. And when we talk about my politics, you know, I call myself a democratic socialist in many ways inspired by the words of Dr. King from decades ago, who said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, there has to be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And as income inequality has declined nationwide, it has increased in New York City. And ultimately, what we need is a city where every single person can thrive.
But also, Mamdani was far from the only political figure that Trump threatened over the weekend, because he also went after a member of his own party, though for a very different reason, and that is Republican Senator Thom Tillis. And that because Tillis had the gall to announce his opposition to Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. A bill that, among other things, will extend tax breaks that disproportionately benefit the rich and fund other key items of Trump's agenda, while dramatically cutting funds for Medicaid, food aid, and other services that millions of Americans rely on to live. And specifically, what you saw is that Tillis was just one of two Republicans who voted against a motion to start debate on the BBB on Saturday, or with the other being Senator Rand Paul, who has repeatedly voiced his opposition to the legislation because of the massive amount of money that it's going to add to the deficit. And after the vote, you had Tillis posting a statement on social media explaining his reasoning, saying, I did my homework on behalf of North Carolinians, and I cannot support this bill in its current form. It would result in tens of billions of dollars in lost funding for North Carolina, including our hospitals and rural communities. This will force the state to make painful decisions like eliminating Medicaid coverage for hundreds of thousands in the expansion population and even reducing critical services for those in the traditional Medicaid population. With Tillis then going on to call for the Senate to return to the House version of the bill, which already passed the lower chamber, with him arguing there that there are a lot of good things in that bill, but that it needs to be passed without jeopardizing access to care for hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians who need it the most. And then after that, what you had was Trump absolutely tearing into Tillis in a series of posts on Truth Social, where he also threatened the senator with a primary challenge when he's up for re-election next year, writing, numerous people have come forward wanting to run in the primary against Senator Thom Tillis. And Trump adding that he'll be meeting with the challengers in the coming weeks and, quote, looking for someone who will properly represent the great people of North Carolina and, so importantly, the United States of America. With Trump then continuing his attacks on Tillis the next morning and claiming in another post that the senator has hurt the great people of North Carolina, with him seemingly accusing Tillis of failing to help his constituents in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and adding, Tillis is a talker and complainer, not a doer. He's even worse than Rand Fauci Paul. All of which then led to shortly after Tillis making the surprise announcement that he's not going to be running for re-election next year. Right? And he released a lengthy statement where he seemed to take aim at members of his own party who blindly followed Trump and the party line, writing, "In Washington over the last few years, it's become increasingly evident that leaders who are willing to embrace bipartisanship, compromise, and demonstrate independent thinking are becoming an endangered species." With him then going on to say that many politicians are motivated by pure raw politics, but don't care about fulfilling campaign promises or taking the time to actually understand how the policies they enact will impact Americans. And so with that, he added he'd rather spend time with his family than spend another 6 years navigating the political theater and partisan gridlock in Washington. In concluding, I look forward to having the pure freedom to call the balls and strikes as I see fit and representing the great people of North Carolina to the best of my ability. And he appeared to follow through on that promise almost immediately, with him delivering a now viral speech on the Senate floor where he absolutely ripped into Trump, who then cheered on his resignation as great news. Or with Tillis claiming that he had asked for different economic impact reports on how the bill would impact his state when it comes to healthcare, and then saying,
"And what I found is the best case scenario is about a $26 billion cut."
With Tillis then claiming that people from the Trump administration then tried to challenge him on that figure, and so they gave him his analytics and had different calls on this, and added,
And I said this, guys, I would love nothing more than you to prove me wrong. I would love nothing more for you to tell me it's not 26 billion or 30 billion, that it's 2.6 billion or 2 billion or 200 million. But after 3 different attempts for them to discredit our estimates, the day before yesterday, they admitted that we were right. They can't find a hole in my estimate. So what they told me is that, yeah, it's rough, but North Carolina's used the system, they're going to have to make it work. All right. So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there? Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office.
But also with this, Tillis isn't the only one who's been tearing into Trump's bill. Because the backlash to Trump's bill, it's been massive, getting hate from major voices all across the political spectrum. With, for example, John Oliver dedicating his show last night to slamming key provisions in the BBB, like the cuts to Medicaid and food assistance, and then saying,
"Right now, Republicans are trying to rush this bill through because they know how toxic it is. And while I know there is a lot going on right now, it is worth paying attention to this bill, because if it becomes law, we're going to be looking back on it decades from now, the same way we look back at all the destructive shit that Reagan did. And when that happens, Republicans cannot say they didn't know what was in it or what it would do. Everyone who votes for this should be held accountable."
But then also, it's not just people on the left. You also had people like Elon Musk chiming in, which, in case you forgot, Musk's past opposition to the bill was the whole catalyst for this embarrassing public breakup with Trump in the first place. And while then things kind of seemingly calmed down, over the weekend we saw Elon Musk doubling down on his criticism. Them writing things like, "The latest Senate draft bill will destroy millions of jobs in America and cause immense strategic harm to our country. Utterly insane and destructive. It gives handouts to industries of the past while severely damaging industries of the future." With him then showing polling data that shows people are agreeing with him and writing that this bill is political suicide for the Republican Party. And there, it is really worth noting that there is a ton of polling out there right now that shows that the public is just not happy with this legislation, to say the least. It's part of the reason we're seeing places call this the most unpopular major legislation in decades, with reports pointing to polls from the Washington Post, Fox News, KFF, and more that found on average 55% of Americans oppose it and only 31% support it, right? And that is including people on both sides of the aisle. While it's no shock that Democrats overwhelmingly have an unfavorable view of it, it is a huge standout that 66% of non-MAGA Republicans also oppose it, and independents are against it 3-1. Though of course, it's worth noting that a decent chunk of the MAGA side of the party is falling in line, and they're heavily in favor of it. Though they're also kind of the outliers here, right? Because only 17% of all respondents say that they believe that this bill will help their family, and 44% said they think that it'll hurt their family. With people then also far more likely to believe that this bill will help wealthy people while hurting lower income and middle class families. Now, as far as what's actually happening with the BBB, while Trump is still insisting that Republicans pass the bill by the 4th of July, why, it's unclear right now if that can actually happen. Though there, I'll say after adjourning at 1 a.m. this morning, the Senate returned hours later to work on legislation and hold a vote-a-rama, which is a marathon voting session where senators are allowed to put forward an unlimited number of amendments to the legislation. But also the vote-a-rama, it's just the pregame, and the real test is what happens after. And there, while Paul and Tillis are the only Republicans who have said for certain that they will be voting against the BBB, the New York Times is reporting that as of this morning, at least half a dozen Republican senators were still undecided, and several issues that could make or break their decisions had not been resolved. Right in there, like Tillis, several other GOP senators had voiced concerns over the cuts to Medicaid. And that is on the complete other side of the spectrum. You had more hawkish Republicans arguing that you actually needed deeper cuts to offset the massive new spending increases. And since Republicans are using the budget reconciliation process, they only need 50 votes. And so with Paul and Tillis being hard-nosed, the GOP can only spare 2 more defections. And then, even if the BBB does pass the Senate, the House is going to have to vote on it again because there were so many changes to the initial bill that they passed. And that, as the first time this went through the House, it passed by just a single vote. And already you have numerous lawmakers in the House voicing major objections to the Senate version of the bill, with the conservative House Freedom Caucus issuing a new statement today saying that the Senate bill is not what we agreed to. And so for now, we're going to have to wait to see how this plays out by, separating the news and then giving you my opinion. I could be wrong. I always like to throw that out there, but I genuinely believe that a version of Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill is going to pass. And largely, I think that's because a lot of the Republican voices outside of like Tillis and Paul here, who, I don't agree with on a number of things, but I believe that they actually believe what is in their head. Time and time again, it feels like a lot of the Republican lawmakers who are like, hey, I have issues with this, they're like cosplaying as independent thinkers, where it's more of a strategy because either one, they want to be able to look to their voter base and go like, hey, I was working around, I was trying to do things, or two, they were using it to get certain things that they wanted in the bill. And so it was more just, playing the game. And I also don't know how many of them actually have the spine to stand up against Trump, especially because people that do in the Republican Party, and most of the time they end up either getting voted out or just resigning. And I think many of the politicians involved here are going to count on their voter base having kind of the memory of a goldfish, where there's so many things happening, everyone gets overwhelmed, and who's going to remember in a year and a half or 2 years who's actually responsible for the thing that put them in a worse position. But hey, whether I'm right or wrong here, that remains to be seen. We'll see how it plays out. And in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below, whether you agree or you disagree with me. Because yeah, this is a news show, but it's also a conversation. And at least for now, we're still allowed to have those. And then we've got more news for you in just a minute. But first, have you ever called a doctor's office and you feel like you're trying to get past the final boss in a game? Press 4 to schedule, press 9 to cry, press 0 to just give up and try again next year. Or what about just trying to find someone in network? The struggle is so real. Don't know if I can curse in this ad spot, but it's rage-inducing. But those are just some of the reasons that I use and tell everyone who will listen to me to use today's sponsor, ZocDoc, aka the sanity-preserving way to find and book an actual doctor who actually takes your insurance. Because ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. No fax machines, no holding music, no phone prompter, which just has you pushing buttons to get you nowhere. And ZocDoc has over 100,000 docs across every specialty: mental health, dental, urgent care, dermatology, and more. You filter by location, insurance, availability, and even patient reviews, so you're not walking into some mystery appointment. And many doctors actually have appointments within 24 to 72 hours, some even same day. I've used it, I still use it. It's stupid easy, and honestly, it makes you wonder why every other health system is just still stuck in the Stone Age. So, stop putting off that appointment, and you know the one. I'm talking to you and my dad right there. And to both of you, I say go to ZocDoc.com/Phil or scan the QR code to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Phil. That's ZocDoc.com/Phil. But then next up in the news today, we have to talk about how in Idaho, firefighters rushed in to stop a wildfire and walked straight into a sniper's trap. Because on Sunday, first responders got a call about a wildfire on Canfield Mountain in Coeur d'Alene. And then at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, as they prepared to extinguish the flames, they came under attack from a different kind of fire.
Some law enforcement right now, there's an active shooter zone. They're shot. BC3's down, BC1's down. Everybody's shot up here. Law enforcement, code 3 now up here.
Because reportedly there was a sniper somewhere in the area that was taking shots at them. But also there was still an active and growing fire. And so first responders, they can't just leave. They got to contain it while police keep them safe from the active shooter. And so reportedly about 300 law enforcement officers eventually arrived on scene, as well as 2 helicopters with police snipers inside. With then officers reportedly exchanging gunfire with the shooter. And at the same time, you had multiple first responders critically wounded and needing help immediately.
We've got 2 unresponsive battalion chiefs, gunshot wounds, multiple gunshot wounds.
But then ultimately about 90 minutes after the shooting started, police said that the shooter apparently died, whether by his own hands or that of law enforcement. And they say that they know his time of death because of his cell phone, which they were tracking, and it suddenly stopped moving around that time. And so reportedly they spotted his body with a weapon lying nearby, and they scooped him up before the fire could reach him. And as all that was playing out, you had 2 firefighters reportedly dying on the way to the hospital, and Sheriff Bob Norris updating us on a 3rd yesterday evening.
He just came out of surgery. He is fighting for his life, but he's in stable condition.
Now, currently, you have police declining to guess at a motive, but it does appear that this attack was planned. Or because one, a firefighter on scene yelled this into his radio.
It's clear to me that this fire was set intentionally to draw us in.
And two, you had the sheriff confirming that at the press briefing.
We do believe that the suspect started the fire, and we do believe that it was an ambush, and it was totally intentional what he did.
Right, but with that, you have many wondering why anyone would actually set up a trap for firefighters. Right, people saying that it's hard to imagine. It's probably the most revered, least controversial profession there is out there. I mean, virtually nobody has a problem with firefighters. And so with that, you had the chairman of the board of county commissioners chalking it up just to pure evil.
June 29, 2025 is a day that we will not forget in this community. It is the day evil showed its face and we lost two outstanding professionals of the highest quality. And I cannot fathom why anyone would commit such a heinous act.
But with this, you also had others speculating that maybe the shooter had personal animosity toward local authorities or subscribed to some kind of anti-government ideology. Right, and with that, you had law enforcement expert Bernard Zapper telling Fox News.
I mean, obviously, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is the center of white nationalism in the United States. It doesn't mean this has anything to do with any of that, but our nation has had some experiences there that are unique.
Right, and what he's referring to is the Aryan Nations, a neo-Nazi group which was headquartered there between 1974 and 2000. It built a compound including a church, a home, a watchtower, and barracks for young white men. And they actually held a conference every year that drew racists from all around the country, from Klansmen to skinheads. And they even committed numerous acts of terror over the years, including bombings, bank robberies, and the attempted assassination of a local priest and human rights activist. But that led to 1998 when the group's members shot at and viciously beat an indigenous mother and her son as they drove past the compound. Because then, with the help of the Southern Poverty Law Center, the family sued the group and its founder, Richard Butler. And the resulting $6.3 million judgment, it bankrupted the Aryan Nations, which led to local authorities auctioning off the compound in 2001. But then, local firefighters burning down parts of it with the family's consent as a training exercise, and here's where the potential big tie-in is. That controlled burn, it happened on June 29th, 2001, exactly 24 years before Sunday's shooting to the day. So there you have many wondering, is that connected? Is it just a coincidence? So there, I'll say, when a reporter asked the sheriff whether there's any special significance to the date, he replied,
No. Nope.
But very notably, since the fall of the Aryan Nations, the Pacific Northwest and Northern Idaho in particular, they've occupied a special place in the far-right imagination as a haven for white people, with, among other things, some white nationalist groups moving there over the years, occasionally making the news for some protest or hate crime. And that, as you have many saying, it's worth noting that this weekend it was the last of Pride Month, and queer people haven't always been welcomed with open arms in Coeur d'Alene, to say the least. In fact, back in 2022, police arrested 31 white nationalists allegedly en route to riot at a Pride event there. So then with all that, on Sunday, you had the County Commissioners Board chairman insisting that this is not who we are.
And when you hear how others portray the people who live here on the news, it's not true. What happened here decades ago is not reflective of the fine people who live here today.
And so with all this, I'll say, one, it's very likely that we're gonna be hearing more about this shooting too, but also two, in the meantime, the fire is still burning. It grew overnight and it's torched at least 26 acres as of Monday. And so you have these remaining firefighters having to battle the flames at the same time as they're dealing with the shock of 3 of their colleagues getting shot in that same location. And overall, it's just a shocking, horrible, heartbreaking situation. But then next up from that today, we've got to talk about how across 4 countries this weekend, Pride was banned, protests were blocked, and democracy was dealt another blow. Right, and so let's start with Hungary, where on Saturday, the country's biggest ever Pride parade took place in the capital city of Budapest. And that notably, despite there being a recently passed law that banned the event. And in fact, that ban, it seemingly backfired, turning what's normally a pretty low-key event into something more like a mass rally against the government of Prime Minister Viktor Orban. I mean, there was anywhere from 100 to 200,000 people in attendance, far more than the 35,000 that took part last year. And as far as the mindset here, we got little snapshots like a first-time attendee who brought her son telling the New York Times that she was fed up with this government trying to make us all afraid. Right? And notably, she said she never actually attended in the past because she wasn't particularly interested in LGBTQ issues, but adding, this year, it was very important to come and show that we are not afraid and don't agree with what they are doing. And all of that as a big thing is that this new law meant that she and all the other participants risk being identified via facial recognition software and slapped with a nearly $600 fine, while the event's organizers, they could potentially face a year in prison. And that, as notably one of the organizers, is the mayor of Budapest. He allowed the event to go ahead by renaming it Budapest Pride Freedom and rebranding it as a municipal event that celebrates when Soviet troops pulled out of the country in June of 1991, which is then why you had the national government threatening the mayor with jail, and they also gave permission to an anti-gay march planned by a far-right party. Right, in that, it hits on the fact that this is really just the latest move in a wide crackdown on the LGBTQ+ community there. Moves that the government there claims are necessary to protect children from foreign globalist forces seeking to corrupt the country's youth and undermine traditional family values. Though that is, you have critics, of course, arguing that the LGBTQ+ community, they're just a convenient scapegoat for Orban as he continues to chip away at what's left of Hungarian democracy. Right, and the timing of this latest law, it might have something to do with the fact that Orban may actually have a real challenge hanging on to power in the next election, with most opinion polls right now giving the party of his rival, Peter Magyar, a solid lead over the ruling party. Though there, I will say, Magyar, he's conservative as well, and he used to actually be part of the ruling party, and it's not like he openly supported pride or LGBTQ+ rights. But he's also not Orban, and so supporters hope that he would at least bring some sort of change. Also, speaking of pride events, in Turkey, they had the event over the weekend, except it went differently there. Right, in Istanbul, you had police blocking any attempt to hold the event, which was also banned there, with authorities reportedly detaining dozens of people who tried to march. Though there, that's been established, right? Istanbul Pride had been banned every year since 2015, and over that time, we've seen President Erdogan increasingly stepping up the rhetoric against the LGBTQ+ community. Right, in January, for example, you had him declaring 2025 the year of the family, and he described the country's declining birth rate as an existential threat, and then he accused the LGBTQ+ movement of threatening the traditional family. And kind of similar to Hungary, you had him casting the movement as part of a foreign conspiracy that's aimed at undermining Turkey, or which is actually also similar to what's been said by the Serbian president about anti-government demonstrations there. Right, and with that, in Serbia this weekend, we saw police clashing with massive crowds of protesters demanding an early election and an end to Vucic's 12 years in power. And these student-led protests, they've actually been going on since the end of last year, which kicked off after more than a dozen people died when the roof of a railway station collapsed, or with that accident widely being seen as a result of government corruption and negligence. And with all that, this weekend, we saw the biggest turnout we've seen in months, with around 140,000 protesters attending in the capital. And then you had clashes happening after the official part of the rally ended. Police using pepper spray, batons, and shields to charge at protesters, some of whom threw rocks, bottles, and other objects. Dozens were also reportedly detained. And that led to last night, you had protesters starting to set up blockades on major roads in Belgrade and other cities and demanding the release of those in custody. Though notably there, you had police responding by clearing the barricades and arresting even more people. So for now, we'll have to see if those protests keep up the momentum or if the government can finally break them. But then all of that, it brings us to the situation in Hong Kong, where the last pro-democracy party to hold protests is now disbanded, which makes it just the latest casualty in a years-long crackdown that's all but silenced dissent in the territory. Right after massive anti-government protests in 2019, a so-called national security law pushed by China and passed in 2020 was used to go after the opposition, and that ultimately led to dozens of arrests, the dissolution of civil society groups, and the shuttering of independent media outlets. But still, through all that, this group, the League of Social Democrats, or the LSD, it kept fighting. And in fact, they've reportedly been the only pro-democracy party that's kept staging small street protests from time to time to carry on its advocacy despite the risks. But now, while you had the party saying it couldn't elaborate on the exact reasons for its end, it said it had finally given in to, quote, intense pressure, and adding in its statement, over these 19 years, we have endured hardships of internal disputes and the near total imprisonment of our leadership while witnessing the erosion of civil society, the fading of grassroots voices, the omnipresence of red lines, and the draconian suppression of dissent. Right, and so for now, there and in those other three countries, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens. And in the meantime, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? But then shifting gears from that to other news as we begin to wind down today's show, I want to talk about the situation where you had no AC, 100+ degree heat, dozens of animals in danger, that is, until the community showed up. Because this is the Montgomery County Animal Services and Adoption Center in Durwood, Maryland. And they recently had an issue with their air conditioning, with the issue being that it just stopped working and it would take at the bare minimum 24 hours to fix, which, put all the animals in their shelter at risk of heat exhaustion as a heat dome brought 100-degree+ temperatures and humidity to the area. And so you had staff setting up fans and cooling mats, they froze chew toys, and they limited the amount of time that their animals spent outside. But they knew that that just wasn't going to be enough. And so what you saw is that they called on the community to help, posting a message on their social media asking people to take in animals for a short-term foster to keep them out of the heat. And what you saw is that immediately that post was liked and shared hundreds of times, and the shelter's phone just ringing off the hook and a line quickly forming, running out the door and onto the sidewalk. And you had Maria Anselmo, the shelter's community relations manager, saying the staff just didn't expect such a large outpouring of help, and adding, we had so many people just show up who were ready to jump in and help that we weren't going to turn those people away. Right? And one of those people being a woman by the name of Katie, who came out fostering 3 cats named SpongeBob, Sandy Cheeks, and Gary, with those just being 3 of the roughly 20 cats cats that were fostered, and that's on top of the 40 dogs and some 10 smaller animals like rabbits and ferrets. Right now, with the air conditioning being fixed in about a day, the fostered animals are starting to make their way back. Or with, for example, Katie returning the 3 cats that she took in a couple of days later. But not all of those animals wound up back in the shelter, because you ended up with situations like a man named Ilya and his wife falling in love with Teton the cat, saying that he seemed to immediately fit into their home, purring when picked up, playing with their 6-month-old baby, and jumping on the cat trees that were still around after the family's previous cat had passed away, with Ilya saying he felt like he was already a family member. And then all in all, you had the shelter expressing their gratitude on social media, saying the responses left us speechless. How do we even begin to express our gratitude for each and every one of you? All animals are safe, cared for, and cool thanks to you. And so, I know this is small compared to the national and international scopes of, the news that we're talking about regularly, but it hits on the fact that every single day there are opportunities to have some sort of positive impact. And that's where a lot of the good and the positive impacts we can have are readily available. And so with that, just a small round of applause to the community for rallying to help this shelter and these animals in their time of need. I think everyone involved, they are our BAMFs of the day today. But then finally today, let's end with some quickie reviews and talk about y'all's comments and some commentary. Starting with the quickie reviews that I can do because I had, oh my God, it was the most glorious lazy weekend where my wife and my boys are on a little trip. I was like, let me have like a week to myself. I haven't had like just some me time. And man, I've just been going on runs, listening to audiobooks, watching anything and everything I can. Binged The Bear season 4, loved it. It was kind of like emotionally healing from the first 3 seasons of the show. Then I binged through season 3 of Squid Game. It's gonna be very divisive, but I didn't mind it. Then I watched Megan 2.0. It's a stupid movie, still pretty enjoyable. Could it have been a lot better? Yeah. But it was what it was. And then I drove an hour to go to a legit IMAX to watch F1. Fantastic movie. I heard if you actually watch F1, you gotta turn off part of your brain and just enjoy it. Luckily, I don't watch it. I had a great time. And then on those drives and the runs, I finished Rebecca Yaros's Fourth Wing. Fun. Actually went into the series blind, not knowing what the hell it was about. I was like, oh, dragons? And it also got a little spicy, and I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. And so I guess all of that is to say, despite so much bad out there, I was able to disconnect and had a great weekend. But with all that said, fully shifting gears to commentary, on the last show, y'all were kind of just in 2 main camps. 1, just generally eye-rolling and shit-talking Pete Hegseth, and 2, sending off on the Pirate Software Stop Killing Games situation. With the top comments around Pete Hegseth reading, if Pete Hegseth told me the sky was blue, I'd open my window to double check. As well as most complex and secretive operation in history, my brother in Christ, the anniversary of D-Day was this month. And quote, the media is lying, cries the people who lied about sharing strike timing details with a reporter. Right, and those were just a few of many comments. And then regarding Stop Killing Games and Pirate Software, you had people saying things like Pirate Software may not be 100% responsible for SKG's decline, but to say that he didn't have any influence in the misrepresentation of the movement's ideology is absolutely insane. And while you had some defending Pirate Software saying that's true, it's just one man's opinion, replies like he is a large reason for why it wasn't more widely accepted. He's been the #1 dissenting voice since the initiative was created, had far more likes. You also had others saying Pirate Software gives off the I'm not wrong, you're wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm still not wrong, you just don't understand vibe a bit too hard. But then also a decent chunk of the comments around that topic had to do with just the Stop Killing Games portion. With Prototype Sky saying, what troubles me most about the destruction of video games is the loss of history. When developers block efforts to archive, emulate, or share their games, especially with no intention of preserving or re-releasing them, they're not just limiting access, they're erasing cultural artifacts and people's opportunity to experience and engage with that part of history. Games are more than entertainment, they're snapshots of art, technology, and society at a moment in time. If a developer pulls a game from shelves or fails to keep it accessible, it should automatically qualify for public archiving. No piece of interactive history should be left to vanish into obscurity. And then of course, with all that, I'd love to know your thoughts and comments on any of today's topics or even these reactions, but that is where today's show is gonna end. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And remember, I'll see you right back here tomorrow because I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Love you, mean it, bye.